as leaders, we need to understand and we need to face, be a little bit humble, have like the humility to accept that we might not be the experts on everything anymore. We might be the experts on some things, but there's going to
Mm-hmm.
be other things that we have absolutely no idea. And we need to be open to be able to say, hey, somebody that's, 20 years, like lived lived 20 years, not lived in their
Yeah.
professional life, like might be more of an expert on certain things than I. And that's where the reverse mentoring is starting to happen a lot.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of I Have Something to Say, where subject matter experts are unafraid and unapologetic about sharing their perspectives regarding issues that impact our lives. They speak up because basically they give a shit. So if you're tired of canned answers and want to finally hear real people cut through the BS and talk about real issues, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Sami Jimen Marrero from Urbander, and behind our mixer is our producer, Chris Majoka from UdoU.
Welcome, everyone. We're back, and we're back with a vengeance. And I'm so excited to have as our guest today, Ilhiana Rojas Saldana. She is the founder and president of BeLIVE Coaching and Consulting, and she's a dear friend of mine too. So what can I say? I'm a little bit biased, but I know, with bias or not, that she's fantabulous. And I'm really excited that she's here because we're going to talk about a very, very important topic that I don't know why, but I've been experiencing this, how do you say, not tension, but this different dynamic with different groups and in different workspaces in the last couple of months. And so I thought of calling on Ilhiana because Ilhiana is an executive and leadership transformation strategy coach. She works on shifting mindsets in the workplace to make sure that teams work more effectively together through professional development and just, assessing what are the issues that are not making people perform at their best and work as cohesive teams. Am I describing that correctly, Ilhiana? In general, the general scope, right?
Yes, the general scope. I would say yes.
Welcome, Ilhiana. How are you?
Oh my God, I'm just thrilled and excited. Happy, well, today's Monday, but happy day, whatever day of the week this is for our audience that's watching. I'm just thrilled to be here, Sami, with you again on this space that you open up to have these very important conversations that some of us take for granted and some of us don't even realize how important, getting this awareness and understanding of what's happening in the workplace. So thank you for the space.
Yeah, so I know that you have a long career. I know you're only 25, but you've had to but you have a long
We are.
career.
We are.
We are. Thank you for including me. That's just, thank you for loving me this way. So you've had a long career, right? And you were very much in the C-level, executive levels, Fortune 500 companies. So you are very well versed in the inner workings of corporate cultures. And so what happened? Like how did you transition into entrepreneurship? Give me your why, and and then let's take a deep look into current not trends but current observations that you might have, right? Of what's going on behind the scenes, like behind the curtain, right? In the workspaces across the US and even globally.
Absolutely. So, like you say, I did corporate for over 20 years in both in Mexico and here in the U.S. in different Fortune 500 companies. I did marketing, sales, new businesses, led local teams, regional teams, global businesses. I did a lot of things, and I really had a lot of fun through, I would say, a good amount of those years. However, unfortunately, towards the last 5 years of that corporate career, something changed, something shifted, and it became a job. And I did not realize that before. I was just like, I was getting paid to do something that I loved, which is an awesome place to be. And then it shifted to, I just need to go there to get a paycheck, right? I'm not having fun anymore. I'm not engaged. I'm dragging my feet to work. And when you're working in a company that makes kids smile every day with products that are amazing, with properties that are just incredible, and that are there to give, to bring people fun into their lives, and you're not having fun, to me that was a big red light, that something was off, something was not, right. And I had to, it took me 5 years to realize that I needed a shift. I needed a change. And looking back at my 20 years, I realized that I was not doing something purposeful. I was not doing something that was meaningful to me, that was creating impact for the things that were important to me anymore. And that's when I realized that I needed to look elsewhere and jump into entrepreneurship and really get back into something that to me was very important and purposeful and meaningful and created great impact, which is what I do today. And in those first 20 plus years of my life, the thing that I loved to do the most was to help my leaders become great leaders and help my teams become high performing teams, and just working with them side by side, and helping them be the best that they could be. That's really where my passion thrived. And now that's what I want to do, what I do actually every day. It's partner and collaborate and help people really be the best that they can be in whatever it is that they're doing. And that's where this refocus on creating a culture and an environment where people feel that they're excited to jump out of bed every morning to go to work, versus drag their feet to work, because it's not a fun place to be when you have to go to work versus wanting to go to work.
And having
Now
gone,
I have fun every day.
yeah, I know, right? But having gone through that experience, you can speak from a place of knowing that, right? Of
Yes.
knowing what that feels like. So there's no guesswork here in what you
No.
do, and also from a place of empathy, right? It's like, ay, pobrecito, I totally get it, right? It's not there's, you don't need to how do you say, dig too deep, right? And
No.
probe too deep, because you know exactly where people are coming from. However, I'm sure that throughout the years you've seen cultural dynamics at work shift and change, and some things kind of like be more prominent issues than others. And so, what would you say now as you travel across the country and support, different teams? What would you say would be like the top two, three key areas that need to be mitigated, or need an interventionist like you, right? To come in and support, and iron out those creases that could be a little bit yucky sometimes in the work culture.
Absolutely. Culture has changed in the workplace, and it's not going back. That's the reality. We have seen a dramatic shift that started with everything that happened with COVID, and then after. And I still hear people that say, "Well, but we're going back. We're not going back." That is this today's the reality, and it's just going to continue to shift. To your point, for the first time ever in like not even decades, like ever, we have 5 generations side by side working together, or not together, it depends, right? But working under the same groups, the same teams, the same leaders, the same roof. 5 generations, that's never happened before, right? We have from the silent generation, or the traditionalists, baby boomers, Generation X, Generation Y, and Generation Z, or the I generation, depending on where how you're reading it, all working at the same time. And that is a big span of beliefs, of practices, of behaviors, of values, of experiences, of experience, of expertise, that
Mm-hmm.
is clashing all the time. Before, we used to have two or three generations, and there wasn't such a significant difference between all of those things, but now you have five. And that, if you approach it on on a positive note, and you're able to really bring them all together, it can create magic. Like the potential and the growth and the acceleration and the impact is just incredible. But if not, it can create a lot of toxic culture, and people, especially the younger generations, to just say, you know what, this is not for me, I'm just moving away. And that's what we're seeing happening in the workplace, where retention is not
A
there.
big
Like,
problem.
really,
Yeah.
it's a
Uh-huh.
big problem, right? Pipelines are not getting built. There's all these things that are happening in the workplace that we hadn't experienced to the levels that we're experiencing them today. And this is not a problem only in the US. We're seeing this happening across industries, across countries, across regions, all around the world.
Wow, that's crazy. And so that if you think about that coupled with the diversity factor too, right? Because the
Absolutely.
younger generation is also becoming more and more diverse, especially here in the US. We see that it's very palpable. And so I could only imagine between the generational clashes, right? And then also the culture clashes and misunderstandings and all of that. Um, how do okay, so yeah, so let's focus on those two, right? Because I'm sure there's a gazillion different issues that you see and that have been able to support teams in addressing, but I could totally see how these are the two big new things, right? The generational gap and the diversity. But from a generational perspective, how what plays out? What are the typical clashes that you see or that people come to you with from a generational perspective that are happening in the workplace, is creating um, lack of cooperation and collaboration, misunderstandings, and all of that stuff?
There's several things, like you mentioned, but I would say there's two main things. One is the mindset and the beliefs, in the differences in both spectrums of the different generations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the values, that again are significantly different in both spectrums of the generations. The more seasoned, I'm going to say, generations come from a mindset of, you just need to get the job done, because our parents, even our generations, like, it was a 9 to 5. That's your job. You're there to make it work, and that's it. Right?
More
That's all you
structured.
need to do. It's more
Yeah.
structured, um,
Mm-hmm.
hierarchical. There's all of these things that we saw our parents and our bosses, and that's the belief of how the work should be done, right? I know the truth, and you need to do it because I know the truth, and I have more experience, and I have more expertise, and I have a longer curriculum under my belt. So therefore, you just need to take my word for it. And I'm talking you as the younger generations. You don't know, and you just follow me, right? And
Do you,
that
yeah,
that
do
is
you
one thing.
find, does this come into play? This just popped into my head. did this come into play too? I almost feel like the more seasoned generation is very much a proponent of, or this is just a general observation, that if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? We've been performing, we're doing well, we're seeing digit increases in revenue, whatever it is, right? Whatever the metric is, as long as it's performing well, that people tend to be very risk adverse, where I see that the younger generation is more favors, right? Experimentation and exploration and just saying, screw it, let's just try it out and see what happens, right? That they're more prone to take calculated risks. What are your thoughts about that? You see that too, or no?
I yes, I would say there is a little bit of that. However, I think there are great leaders that are definitely not risk averse and they're looking for change all the time. I think it goes more towards the habits, the practices, and the behaviors that we're
Mm,
used to, and changing those practices and those behaviors when you've been doing them for 40, 50 years. It's hard, right? It's hard to shift and to change, versus the younger generations. They're just building those habits,
right.
and the way that they've been introduced into the workplace has been a completely different way, a faster way, right? Everything is at the tip of their fingers, versus
Mm,
for our generations, it took longer to do things, to make decisions, to check things out, to vet them, to develop them.
mm,
It was like months and years, versus for the younger generations, or the people that are coming in, everything is like right now, to the
yeah,
point, like quick.
yeah,
So that's why I think that's why we see the difference in speed, but it's more about the what they're used to doing in their traditional or in their regular environment, so to speak.
right.
And going back to the mindset, the getting the job done from the more seasoned generation is important, but for those generations, Gen Z and the younger millennials that are coming in, it's more about the purpose. It's more
Mm,
about the meaning. It's more about is what's the impact that this whatever I'm doing going to have in my community, or in the things that I care for, on the world. Like, there really needs to be meaning and purpose behind it, versus I'm just being told that I need to do this and I just need to do it. Like, I don't even understand why. Right.
right.
And there's where part of this disparate ways of looking at it, there's a lot more asking why,
Mm,
and that might create challenge to their leaders, right? Because they're not used to answering why. It's like, well, it
right.
is it is what it is, and you
It's
just
because I
follow.
say so.
It's because I
Exactly.
say so. And it's not that they're challenging us in a bad way. They're that's actually one of the benefits. They're questioning, like, is this really what we're meant to be doing? Why haven't we thought about this or that? Or is it the right approach? Should we be exploring a different way? And that's where innovation can happen, right? But we see the why. Many of us take it as a confrontation, right, as a
Mhm,
challenge, and that's where part of these conflict in the workplace happens, versus seeing
mhm.
it on a positive, like, you're right, like, let's think this a little bit more and explore it, and see if there's new opportunities to do things.
Wow. So those would be the two, what you've described is like the values and beliefs, and then behaviors and practices, right? So it would be something that's very internal that you really can't, you can't see. It's, you can experience it, right? People's values. But then
Yeah.
something that is very tangible and visible, which is the behaviors, right? Like taking time off, and demanding flex hours and wanting to work remote and wanting to find purpose in what you do, or giving more importance to certain tasks than others based on the sense of purpose you've attached to it, right? Or not. And so I could totally see how more seasoned people could be frustrated with, new executives or new professionals coming into the workplace because they're so, how do you say, concerned about process and about how things currently are and how they've always worked, whereas young people are kind of like trying to set a new path and trying to voice their interest and find purpose in their own right sense of
Yeah.
belonging within the
And
workplace.
yeah, and there's another thing that needs to be taken into consideration, and it is that before, it was the years that you've been doing things that gave you the seal of expert, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how knowledge was passed on. But today, the reality is that things are changing at such a fast rate that with the digital transformation, knowledge and expertise can be, people that are out of college might have more expertise sometimes in as digital natives in this new
Yes.
world, that some of us that have been doing whatever it is that we've been doing for 20, 30 years. So there's also like a leveled playing field in some way or form. Yes, there's things that you do need to have the 20, 30 years under your belt to
Yeah.
still call yourself an expert. But there's also, as leaders, we need to understand and we need to be a little bit humble, have like the humility to accept that we might not be the experts on everything anymore. We might be the experts on some things, but there's going to
Mm-hmm.
be other things that we have absolutely no idea. And we need to be open to be able to say, hey, somebody that's, 20 years, like lived lived 20 years, not lived in their
Yeah.
professional life, like might be more of an expert on certain things than I. And that's where the reverse mentoring is starting to happen a lot, right? Like
Mm.
I'm mentoring younger professionals on certain things, but then they're mentoring me on other things. And we need to be open, and we need to be have the humility to accept that I, as a seasoned professional, need to unlearn a lot of things and relearn new things. And it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. But sometimes for some of us, it really like hits on our ego, right? Because
Yes.
it goes back to the mindset and the beliefs and the practices and the behaviors, because that hadn't happened. That was not something that had happened in the past. There's a lot of these dynamics that we're starting to see, and we're continue to see shift and change very quickly.
Yes. And so what have you seen are some adjustments or some tips or some things that can be done right immediately to promote better understanding and more of a pause, I feel, right? To get to see each other for the value that we bring to get the job done, regardless of age and generation.
Absolutely. I think there's several things. One is being curious. Being curious, and one in us personally, be curious and ask questions and be open to this unlearning and learning and understanding the different perspectives, and the different points of view and the different experiences and all of that. But also creating the spaces of curiosity, because in the end, as leaders, many of us have that responsibility to be able to open the forums within meetings, within our teams, within our environments that we're in, virtually or not, or in person, where Gen Z, we invite Gen Z, and younger millennials to openly express their thoughts, and feel that they're being heard, that they're being valued, that the knowledge that they have, that their expertise or just their perspective is an important one. And we need to be able to provide them that space through curiosity and action, right? So that's one very important one.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one you mentioned in a way at the beginning, the empathy piece, the connection. We are moving into empathy. Has always been important, but now really more than ever, we need to be more, as leaders, more empathetic, and touch into that, to be able to create these meaningful relationships, these authentic relationships with people. And being an empathetic leader doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything that everybody says and does and thinks. You just need to be able to understand and put yourself on the other person's feet for a moment. You can still disagree, and it's okay, but at least having that openness to see the world through somebody else's eyes, so that then you can understand, and then you can have really meaningful conversations about something, versus my way is the only way and you're wrong and I'm right and you don't know and I hold the ultimate truth. Empathy is going to become, or is currently, one of those key competencies of a true leader, as we move forward. So those, I would say, become critically important. There are many others, but those I see again and again and
Yeah.
again, where there's an issue in the workplace. It's because those are not present. One of the
Yes.
one or both are
Oh,
not present.
oh, I could totally see that. So just yesterday, and this wasn't a working environment, so it's not a company or an organization. It was more convening of leaders, right, within a particular sector to come behind the scenes. And I'm talking in code because I signed an NDA. I can't talk about exactly what it was, but I was called in to help facilitate the conversation, to moderate the conversation, just to make sure that everyone was able to participate and that their voices were valued, right? Okay. And so then when I got there, now this is all coming together for me, what you just explained about voicing and making sure
Mhm.
that that everyone's valued. And so in this particular group, you had of all ages, now that I think of it. And it was funny because you had like the elders, right, of the community that were participating, and they came from all over the United States, right? So from different, that we had like maybe 20, 25 people there. And so we went through that exercise of having people weigh in, and it was interesting because the younger people were more disruptive in their language, if you will, right? They were like, nah, like more disruptive. And then the elder, especially the youngest in the group and the elder, I could see now how they might have been clashing, because he's like, well, no, we can't call it that, what you're calling it. And so then someone that's more my age, right, somewhere in the middle, then jumped in, and she's told the younger person, she said, what you're saying is you're both saying the same thing, right? And then she explained to the younger person, it's all semantics, but we're playing chess here, right? And so what the gentleman here is trying to say is that we need to use this terminology, but we're arriving at the same place, right? We want the same outcome, we want the same impact, but we need to call it this, so the powers that be right? They're not how do you say, don't reject it off the bat, right? That they're more receptive to what we have to say as a collective. And so then she kind of squashed it, right? I was like, epic. I didn't, the group itself kind of like sorted it out, but what you're just explaining played out exactly how you just described it yesterday for me in this group, right? Where there was a little bit of dissonance, but it was just because of the experience, already knowing that when you come with a disruptive idea or want to really affect change in society, you have to go about it, right? It's basically like he already knew how to navigate the BS, right? And he's trying to tell the younger person, I know where you want to get to, but we need to do it this other way, because otherwise they're going to squash us right off the bat, right? So is that representative of what you just described?
And you bring an incredible point about communication. I mean, communication has always been one of those things that within a team environment or a group environment, it's the number one barrier to collaboration. But right now, we need to take it to even that next level, because it's
Mhm.
not only about the process of communication, but it's about what exactly what you just said, what words mean to me versus what that same word can mean to somebody else. We might be talking the same language, we might be using the same words, but the meaning behind the word might be completely different. And because we haven't aligned on the meaning of the word, that's where then the conflict also happens, because we're using the same word but it means completely different things for both of us. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in redefining norms of communication and language and what specific words mean for the group, that's working together, so that then everybody is now talking about the same thing, right? Especially
Yeah.
new words that are, we're throwing out, like equity and equality, right? That I keep hearing people using equity and equality as if they were the same
Interchangeably.
thing
Yeah,
interchangeably, and I'm like,
right.
no, it's not. Like, they're completely, they're different. But we need to start again going back to the being open to relearning, understanding, hearing, and bringing and defining what each of these words mean generally, and what each of these words mean to us as a team, as a group of people, and we can even redefine certain things, right? I've done a lot of work with different organizations that they say, well, we want a sense of inclusion. Well, let's define what inclusion means to us, right? We can
Right.
understand the textbook definition of inclusion, but that doesn't mean that it works for a certain environment or group. So we need to go to do that work, to have that open and candid conversation, to say, what does it mean for us? And then everybody comes together, so that those difficult conversations at least happen, not because we have different definitions, but because we have different perspectives, and and
Right.
and then we can start to have a more productive and meaningful conversation.
So I know that there's like most recent data, right, regarding this generational gap, and how's that reflected in the workplace. And so could you share with us like the latest and greatest?
Absolutely. So, Forbes, not Forbes, sorry. There was a new study that
Study.
just came
Yeah.
out, and from Deloitte. And you can Google it. It's on their website amongst the research that they have, and they came up with two very important, or at least I thought that they were very interesting points of view between Gen Z, and the
The
boomer
boomers.
generation, and the difference was Gen Z values empathy, for example, as the second most important trait that they want to have in a boss,
Mm.
versus their bosses actually rank empathy fifth. if not even lower at their best.
Mhm.
So again, we go back to that initial conversation that we were having in terms of values and behaviors, where if you have a Gen somebody that's Gen Z, that for them empathy is critically important, and a boss that it's like empathy, like no, like that's not as important, then you're clearly going to start seeing these differences, right?
Yeah,
It's that
totally.
get the job done mentality. That's one thing. Another one was about on mental health, and I think we're seeing that again, those differences of opinions happening in the workplace, where Gen Z is having a significantly higher, or putting a significantly higher value on their mental health, right,
Mm,
and their well-being, where they want to have a balanced day and an environment where they can, yes, be doing their work, but then when they're not working, they want to not think about work.
right.
Right, versus the bosses are like, you're on 24/7. If you get an
Mhm.
email, you answer the email right at
Yeah.
that moment in time. If you're on vacation, like, you answer. But so there's again these differences in
Wow.
mental health and the importance of well-being and what it
And
means
self-care and
for, and
self-care, right?
self-care, right, and
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that the bosses don't value self-care. It's just that the where you put it in the level of importance is starting to be different, right,
Yeah.
and we're seeing it now in many companies, where they're reevaluating the benefits that they're providing employees, because they're recognizing the importance of well-being and providing those spaces and those
Yeah.
moments. So that's another one, for example. And the third one that rose to the top is the importance that work, meaning what I'm doing, has as a part of my identity. Right, like for me, or for the bosses, we are our work, we're our title, like that's who we are, and it's an important part of our identity. Versus for Gen Z, it's not. Like, I mean, it's that and a lot of other things that
Mhm.
are important to me, but it's not just, I'm not just one hat.
Mhm.
I'm multiple hats, I have multiple causes, I want to do a lot of different things, and that can be seen in the workplace as lack of commitment, because
Mhm.
I'm not just one thing, right? And so again, just some interesting differences that are
Yeah.
happening between both generations, and it's just something that we need to keep in mind wherever you are in the spectrum, right? Because it's not only about the leaders and the bosses understanding this from Gen Z, it's also for Gen Z to understand, those different points of view, because it's going to be the only way to have this conversation to become productive.
Yeah, totally. And you know what? I mean, I guess every company's gonna, especially now after the pandemic too, right? Where a lot of Gen Zs in that 2 year lockdown, right, went from high school into the workplace. And then also it changed the way we work with the whole remote, right? Work experience. And so I've heard of companies, like for example, Nationwide. I know Nationwide offers 10 different options for remote working. Who does that, right? But that, to again, to address retention, to all of these things, and that's just one example, right? So, like, how do like it really takes a company's culture to be empathetic, right? To come back of the trauma of the pandemic and say we need to reassess, how we're going to approach this work-life balance, because people also, the pandemic also made a lot of people even our age, right, say, oh no, oh hell no, I'm not going back to that, that craziness, right? Life is too short, to be así como loca all the time. And so I got to tell you, they have everywhere from coming into the workplace, the physical space every day, 9 to 7, as usual, like as the standard, right? Here in America, in the US. Two, minimum 1 day a month you need to come into the physical space, and the rest of the time you could be remote. But that's the spectrum. You were talking about the spectrum, right? And so that's from the perspective of physically showing up to the workplace. That's the spectrum that they've provided. I think that was epic, right? And I'm sure that in everything there has to be, right, to some level, an opportunity to provide a broader spectrum of alternatives to really address the individual needs of your workforce, to be able to make them happier. Because if they're happier, then they're more productive. And I know there's plenty of studies that talk about that.
Absolutely. And the there, like you say, there's plenty of studies that show that high engagement is directly proportional to having high performance, right? And
Mhm.
the moment that your engagement gets low, then that's it. Like your performance just goes out the door, no matter what you do. So, and to have that engagement, you need to have that psychological safety on the one hand, for people to feel safe, that I can bring my full self to work. I'm valued, I'm respected, I've been heard of. Their work is meaningful. There's this impact, there's
They
this
care about
purpose.
me.
They care
They care
about
about
me and
me.
what's
That's the empathy
important.
piece. Yeah.
That's the
Uh-huh.
empathy piece. And
Mhm.
the third is, I have the capacity to do the work, right? I have the resources, I have the support, I have the training, and I have the energy. And that's where all of these things that you mentioned, in terms of uh, all these different things that we're seeing in terms of shifting to 4 day work days, a four
Oh,
week
I heard
work
about
day.
that. Yes.
That's becoming a thing, right?
Yeah.
Having flexible time, having doing things by results, versus by hour. Like, there's all these new ways of doing that, doing uh, working. And that's where then we need to have these conversations, because the leaders are not going to have all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
need to open the spaces, coming back to the curiosity, coming back to the empathy, coming back to the listening, to creating the spaces where we have this dialogue, to be able to understand, okay, then what's needed, and more importantly, how do we make it happen?
Mm-hmm.
Because all of these shifts, if they're not done the right way, it can be even worse than where we were.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a joint effort, where we're all new at this. All of us, no matter how many years, this is the new workplace environment, where we're
Yeah.
all learning as we go. And that's what we need to recognize, that
Mm-hmm.
I have some expertise, but you have some expertise, but my kids have some expertise, right?
Yes.
On certain things, and we're all relearning a lot of these things.
Yeah, that's great. So, I mean, this is a fascinating conversation. We see it everywhere in business, even, us as business owners. I keep on meeting new, younger entrepreneurs. And to me, it's just
Yeah.
so, right? It's so awesome that people are either coming out of college and not even going into college, right? I mean, there's so many opportunities now. And with technology, that's also broadened,
Oh my
right? The level of options that people have, that they could go to trade school, they could get a certificate in coding. I mean, there's just so much going on, that it'll be interesting. We need to have a, like, every 6 months, right? Have a new conversation, because this is changing, like you said. It's like the speed of
It
in which this is all being transformed into, like, a new way. For example, too, physical spaces, like the whole remote thing, from a corporate level and an infrastructure or overhead level. I was just talking to someone, when was it? This morning. We had a meeting. Yes, this morning. And they told us that they're based out of New York City, but they have satellite offices across, the country, smaller. But that no one really goes to the office that's right by Wall Street, but they're stuck with an 8-year lease still pending that they can't get out of, right? Isn't that crazy? So it's like they have this empty space that some people use it, most don't. It's always empty, but now big corporations are kind of stuck, right, with these leases that they can't break without huge penalties. And so even that, right? So a little bit of empathy also from the team, perspective, in that, there's so many layers to this, that is really difficult also for leaders, right, to navigate, because it's in what do we do? How do we offset, right, this hemorrhaging, right, on one end, right, while having to deal with all this other stuff that has to do with people and the human resources aspect of it. It's a lot.
Oh my God, it's never changing. I mean, it's ever changing.
Yeah.
And I think to your point, I think 6 months actually is a lot. Like I'm constantly, like I was just in a conference yesterday, and the amount of things that were shared in the conference of what's coming, it was just baffling to me. I'm like, oh my God. And I consider myself somebody that reads, and
Mhm.
many things were there that I was like, I did not know that, and that's so fascinating. Like we have to keep that's where who are you surrounding yourself with? What are you reading?
Mhm.
What are you constantly doing to keep yourself abreast of all of the new things? You don't have to be an expert. You just have to sort of know what's happening, so that I remember when the chat GPT came up, it was launched the first day that I saw it actually pop up on my feed, and then and I texted somebody like, what's this? And in a couple of hours we were already trying to register
Sort
and
it out.
figuring, and then 2 days later it was all over the news, right? But it's this kind of thing that if you're not on top of it, you're you might be losing of something that can really make a difference, or not, but at least now you know.
Exactly.
So
It's just knowing the trends, right? Because you don't want to be Circuit City or Blockbuster, right? You want to make sure that your business, is aware of not only what's happening and what the sentiment is and what the effective interventions look like and what those outcomes could be, right, with the right support, professional support, to work with teams and get people on the same page and iron out, right, those little wrinkles that could make, production either halt or be to experience some setbacks. So that way, if you're constantly keeping your fingers on the pulse of what's going on, you could quickly shift. You can bring in, people like you with your expertise, Iliana, to help in that, in those growing pains, if you will, so you can land on your feet on the other side of this and say, okay, now what's next, right? Because it's, as you said, it's ever changing. So it's just a matter of just being on top of it all the time.
absolutely, absolutely.
So thank you so much, Ileana, for your insight. This was a wonderful conversation. I know we'll be talking again. We just have to be on the lookout, for when we experience another growing pain. And I'm gonna make sure to call you. Okay.
Absolutely. Well, there are several that are going to come up. We're going to see them through the second half of the year.
Ugh.
Then, yeah, and then we're going to see a couple more next year. So, yeah, this is changing very, very quickly. So we'll definitely have to connect.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Ileana. I'll be talking to you soon. Okay, Mama.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great
Un
one.
beso. Bye bye.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of I Have Something to Say, where subject matter experts are unafraid and unapologetic about sharing their perspectives regarding issues that impact our lives. They speak up because basically they give a shit. So if you're tired of canned answers and want to finally hear real people cut through the BS and talk about real issues, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Sami Jimen Marrero from Urbenter, and behind our mixer is our producer, Chris Majoka from UdoU.